Hello again, I'm back. Today we discuss the one, the only Yang Xiao Long and my favourite character. But first, a thank you to my wonderful patrons for making these episodes possible, links below. And I want to give a shout out to my potential new editor. Let's see how this goes. Now Yang, Yang, the golden dragon, the team mum, the only character who obviously attended regular classes and thus knows how to study in a classroom. What else is there to say about her? Well, as it happens, a lot, enough that I can probably do several episodes on her. But for now, let's just talk about some generalities. First and foremost, there's the yellow trailer, which opens with "Scathing Eyes asks that we be symmetrical, one-sided and easily processed, yet every misshapen spark's unseen beauty is greater than its would-be judgment." There's a lot of ways that this could be taken, from foreshadowing the loss of Yang's arm to telling the audience that we should not be judging a book by its cover, which lines up well with Monty Oom's writing intent of giving seemingly simple characters and then revealing layers and depth to them as time went on. But layers and depth come in many forms, especially in a show built on meta-narratives like RWBY. The yellow trailer itself is a very fun example of this, managing to not only allude to Yang's role with Blake in the Beauty and the Beast narrative through music, but also by combining two entirely separate fairy tales into one massive illusion. The obvious and surface-level fairy tale is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Yang is the girl, the house is the club, Junior is one bear, but the twins are too hot and too cold by virtue of their colour schemes. But there is also Snow White and Red Rose, a story about a pair of sisters who befriend a bear who turns out to be a prince in golden armour. The Malachites even utilised discarded outfit designs from Ruby Rose and Weiss, making their allusions to fairy tale namesakes clear. The shift in the story comes from Yang, who goes to battle with the bear and leaves it wreathed in gold. In essence, she enters their story and makes it her own. Now, will that tell us how Salem is eventually overcome? No, but I do feel it does do a good job of signifying just how much can go into a character, and why it's important that we look underneath the surface even as far back as the trailers. Moving on from that topic, let's talk about some other facets of Yang's character that I feel tend to be overlooked. This has come up subtly in the show several times, but I feel it's enough of a recurring element to be called canon to one degree or another, namely that Yang had to fill a paternal or otherwise generally adult role in the household after Summer's disappearance. This can be first hinted at with Yang having been cited as the one to read RWBY her bedtime stories despite only being 2 years older. It's also spelled out in V5 when Yang outlined that after both her mothers left, it was she who had to pick up the pieces, had to keep things together, alone.
I'm sorry, I don't think you know what it's like to be left. You have a giant family, recitals to perform at, dinners to attend. I didn't have any of that. My mom left me. Ruby's mom left too. Ty was always busy with school and Ruby couldn't even talk yet. I had to pick up the pieces. I had to keep things together. Alone.
This was hinted at and given some greater context way back in Volume 2, long-form storytelling. Because during burning the candle, Yang discusses Ty having been shut down after Summer's disappearance. This led to enough neglect that a presumably 5-year-old and grieving Yang was left alone in their cabin with RWBY long enough to load her into a cart and make it deep enough onto Patch that they couldn't just be found in short order.
Why did she leave you?
That question. Why? I didn't know the answer, but I was determined to find out. It was all I thought about. I would ask anybody I could what they knew about her. Then, one day, I found something. What I thought was a clue that could lead me to answers. Or maybe even my mother. I waited for Dad to leave the house, put Ruby in a wagon, and headed out.
Additional fun fact, we never get a timeline for Ty's recovery, so there's a lot of wiggle room, but given the clear impact it had on Yang, I'd say this was far from quick. On this topic, I also discovered something rather grim, the term parentification, and based on its technical definition, I think it can be readily applied to Yang. I will highlight the relevant facets. A significant byproduct of parentification is losing one's own childhood. The child in question takes on excessive responsibility in the family without their caretaking being acknowledged or supported by others. By adopting the role of parent and caregiver, the child loses their real place in the family unit and is left lonely and unsure. In extreme cases, there may be what has been called a kind of disembodiment, a narcissistic wound that threatens one's basic self-identity. In later life, parentified children often experience anxiety over abandonment and loss, and demonstrate difficulty handling rejection and disappointment within interpersonal relationships. Suffice to say, a lot of that lines up with Yang. The first two I feel were already covered, but we also have Yang's identity issues and uncertainty on what to do with her life brought up in Volume 2 to reference, and even more, there's her major abandonment issues and the trauma associated with rejection. There's other scenes one can read into on the subject as well, such as RWBY seeking out Yang for guidance and comfort after V3, or Yang being the one to seek out RWBY despite the narrative making it clear that Tai had the ability to do so via Oobleck and Port, but that's more down to audience interpretation than a character stating directly at the screen what they feel and never being disproven.
Not yet. Have you thought about going after her? Trying to bring her home?
I've got to look after some things.
Oof, that was a heavy one. Let's round this out with something easier, because a breakdown in Yang's fighting skill would run me up a very long time. At the start of this post, I referenced Yang being the only one who seemed to know how to study in a classroom, and I stand by that. Blake spent much of her life fighting in the wilderness and seemed largely lost in her first lecture hall scenario. RWBY is clearly checked out, and Weiss meanwhile is writing down everything rather than just taking notes on key topics. Yang is also the only character for whom classwork is not an issue, be it in Glinda yelling at Juniper, RWBY's initial struggles, Weiss's perfectionism, or Blake's attendance issues. She was also the only one in the main cast who seemingly studied, graduated and entered Beacon in the normal way. And let's not forget that just like RWBY, Yang built Basilica, is a skilled artist and potentially even added the initial gun to her prosthetic, though that last one is down to interpretation. Suffice to say, Yang is smart as hell and that should be recognised. And that's all for now. If you want to commission 3D art, please check out my Ko-fi links below. Thanks for tuning in.